"Alexis, I need you to approve this invoice. Today." Those words came from my director, Vincent, as he dropped a thick folder on my desk without any explanation. I looked up from my computer screen, completely confused about what he wanted from me. Vincent had been my boss for 3 years at Hartwell Financial Solutions, a prestigious company downtown, and he'd never rushed me like this before. The morning light filtered through our office windows as I slowly opened the folder with hesitation. Inside was an invoice for $7 million. My hands went ice cold. $7 million from a company I'd never heard of in my entire life. The amount made absolutely no sense to me whatsoever. I'd been a senior financial analyst for 5 years, and I knew suspicious transactions the way a doctor knows fevers. I could smell fraud from a mile away. This was wrong. Very wrong. Something was off about this entire situation. Vincent stood there watching me intently. His jaw was tight. His eyes held something I couldn't quite name. Fear maybe. Or pressure. Desperation perhaps. "I don't understand," I said carefully, trying to keep my voice steady. "This vendor isn't in our system. I've never seen them before." He leaned against my desk casually, but his body language was tense. "It's a new partner. Just approve it, Alexis. Today, please." I should have said no right then and there. I should have trusted my gut instinct completely. But Vincent was my director. He controlled my paycheck, my work schedule, my performance reviews, everything that mattered. More importantly, he controlled my entire future at Hartwell Financial Solutions. I'd worked incredibly hard to get where I was. Senior analyst meant respect from my colleagues. It meant security for my career. It meant I could finally afford the nice apartment I'd been eyeing downtown for months. "I need to verify this first," I said, keeping my voice as steady as possible despite my racing heart. "I need to check the vendor database carefully. I need approval from the accounting department. We have procedures for this." Vincent's face darkened immediately, like a storm cloud moving across the sky. "I'm your director. That's all the approval you need," he said coldly. His voice had an edge I'd never heard before. It was sharp, demanding, almost desperate, like someone running out of time. He walked away without waiting for my answer, leaving the folder open on my desk. I sat there alone, staring at those 7 zeros on the invoice. My stomach twisted into knots. This wasn't just a simple request. This was a test, and I was being set up to fail one way or another. I could feel it in my bones. That night I couldn't sleep at all. I lay in bed, staring at my ceiling, thinking obsessively about the invoice. $7 million. Those numbers kept swimming through my head like sharks. I kept seeing Vincent's desperate face, the fear in his eyes, the way his hands had trembled. At 2 a.m, unable to sleep anymore, I got up and went to my laptop. I pulled up the vendor database from home, something I rarely ever did outside of work hours. The company on the invoice, Nexus Global Solutions, didn't exist. I checked multiple times using different search methods. No registration in any database. No business license. No history. No previous transactions. Nothing at all. My heart started pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. This was a fraud. Real serious criminal fraud. And Vincent was asking me to participate in it. I sat back in my chair, hands shaking uncontrollably. What was happening? Why would a respected director, someone I'd known for 3 years, ask me to commit fraud? There had to be something bigger I was missing. Something much more serious than just stealing money from the company. I needed to find out what was really going on behind the scenes. The next morning I went to the office very early. 6:30 in the morning. The parking lot was mostly empty and quiet. I took the elevator to the 3rd floor, my security badge clicking as I swiped it through the reader. My department was dark and silent like a sleeping ghost town. Cubicles sat empty, looking like sleeping animals. I went directly to my desk and pulled up my computer. I needed to trace this invoice to its source. Where had it actually come from? Who had sent it? I dug through old email records methodically, searching for any communication about Nexus Global Solutions. Found absolutely nothing. Then I made a decision. I searched for Vincent's personal emails. I felt guilty doing it, but I had to know the truth. And there it was. An email thread from 3 weeks ago that I'd never seen before. Vincent had been communicating with someone I didn't recognize. The emails were extremely vague. Coded language. Strange phrases. The situation needs resolution immediately. Time is running out fast. We need to move the funds before the audit happens. My blood ran cold completely. This wasn't just simple fraud. This was something Vincent was desperate about. Something with a real deadline. Something with serious consequences if it failed. I spent the entire morning researching everything I could find. I looked into Vincent's personal background, his finances, his recent activity. I dug through company records that I had legitimate access to as a senior analyst. What I found made me feel physically sick. Vincent had been making personal loans to very dangerous people. Large loans. Extremely large loans. To the wrong kind of people entirely. I found evidence of significant gambling debts. Casino records from offshore locations. Loan shark connections. Everything pointed to one clear conclusion. Vincent was in serious trouble. Deep, dangerous trouble. The kind of trouble that gets people hurt or worse. And now he was trying to solve it by stealing from Hartwell. By using me to help him steal money. That's when I realized the horrible truth. Vincent hadn't chosen me because I was the best analyst. He'd chosen me because he thought he could control me. Or so he believed. I sat at my desk, the printed emails in my hands, feeling the weight of everything crashing down on me like a tidal wave. I had to do something. But what exactly? If I reported Vincent, I'd become a whistleblower. That came with its own dangers and risks. But if I stayed silent, I'd be complicit in the biggest fraud in the company's entire history. I needed advice from someone I could trust completely. I needed someone with experience in these situations. There was one person at Hartwell who'd always been straight with me and honest. Patricia. She worked in our compliance department, handling fraud cases and violations. We'd gone to the same college, though different years and different majors. She'd helped me navigate company politics when I first got hired 5 years ago. I found her in the break room that afternoon, making tea quietly. Patricia, can we talk? Somewhere private. I need your help with something very serious, I said quietly. She looked at me with those sharp, intelligent eyes of hers. She'd been in compliance for 12 years. She could smell trouble from a mile away. She had that gift. My office. 5 minutes, she said, nodding knowingly. I nodded and walked away, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone could see my chest moving. This was the moment. Once I told her, there would be no going back. The office door would close, but the truth would be out there. Growing. Spreading. Changing everything forever. Patricia's office was small but incredibly organized. Filing cabinets lined one entire wall neatly. Her desk held 2 computer monitors and a coffee mug that said, "I'm watching you." I almost smiled at that despite my fear. Almost. I sat down in the chair across from her and told her absolutely everything. The invoice. The vendor that didn't exist anywhere. The emails I'd found. Vincent's gambling debts. His connections to dangerous people. His desperation. I laid it all out like cards on a table, holding nothing back. Patricia listened without interrupting me once. Her face stayed calm and professional throughout my entire story. When I finally finished speaking, she leaned back in her chair slowly. "How long has this been going on?" she asked seriously. "I don't know exactly. But the emails go back 3 weeks at least. Maybe longer than that. Possibly much longer." She nodded slowly and thoughtfully. "And Vincent asked you to sign off on it?" "Yes, this morning. He said just to approve it. That he was all I needed. That his approval was enough for any transaction." Over the next 3 days, Patricia and I worked together closely. We documented everything very carefully. Every email. Every suspicious transaction. Every piece of evidence pointing to Vincent's scheme. Copied important files. I created a detailed timeline of events. I wrote detailed notes about every conversation Vincent and I had during this period. Patricia kept everything secure and locked in her office safely. She told me to act completely normal. Go to work. Do my job. Don't let Vincent suspect anything unusual. It was the hardest thing I'd ever done in my entire life. I sat across from Vincent in meetings, listening to him talk about quarterly reports and budget forecasts, knowing what he was planning, knowing he was a criminal, knowing he'd tried to drag me down with him. I watched him walk through the office talking to people, laughing at jokes. Nobody knew. Nobody suspected anything was wrong. The burden of the secret weighed on me like a physical weight. I could barely eat anything. I couldn't sleep properly. I kept checking my phone, waiting for Patricia's next message. Waiting for something to happen. Waiting for this nightmare to end finally. On the fourth day, Patricia called me into her office again. She looked tired. Serious. Concerned. The audit committee meets tomorrow at 2 p.m., she said quietly. They want to review everything you found. They want to talk to you first, off the record. You'll tell them everything you've told me. I nodded, but fear crashed over me like a wave. This was real now. This was official. Once I testified to the audit committee, there would be a formal investigation into Vincent. He would know. Everyone would know. What happens to me? I asked nervously. You're protected, Patricia said firmly. You reported fraud. You're a whistleblower. The company has protocols for this situation. Nobody can retaliate against you legally. I wanted to believe her. But I'd seen retaliation happen in subtle ways before. People got assigned to bad projects. Their raises disappeared. They became invisible in the company. Will Vincent know it was me? I asked quietly. Patricia hesitated. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know. Eventually, yes. But by then, the investigation will be underway. He won't be able to touch you. The audit committee meeting was in a conference room on the 5th floor that I'd never been to before. High-level executives. Very important people. I walked in at exactly 1:55 p.m., and 4 people sat around a long table waiting for me. Patricia was there too, sitting to the side quietly. There was a woman named Donna who ran the audit department. A man named Jack who handled fraud investigation cases. 2 others I didn't recognize. They were all watching me carefully. Alexis, Donna began formally. We appreciate you coming to us today. This is an extremely serious matter. We need you to walk us through everything you know. So I did it again. I told them about the invoice. About the fake vendor. About the emails I'd found. About Vincent's debts. About his connections. I answered their questions thoroughly. I showed them all the documentation I'd gathered. I watched their faces get darker and darker as I spoke. Jack was taking lots of notes. Very detailed notes. When I finally finished, Donna leaned back in her chair slowly. This is extremely serious, Alexis. We're going to launch a full investigation immediately. In the meantime, you need to continue working normally. Don't discuss this with anyone. Not Vincent. Not your colleagues. Nobody. But Vincent knew something was happening. I could see it in his face immediately. He'd been called into meetings. Meetings he wouldn't tell me about. He looked worried and hunted. He kept asking me direct questions. Have you talked to anyone about that invoice? Has anyone asked you questions? Are you absolutely sure you haven't mentioned it? His desperation was becoming obvious to everyone. Other people were starting to notice something was wrong. I could see colleagues looking at him differently, whispering when he walked by. The office was picking up on the tension, even if they didn't understand it completely. On Friday, just 4 days after the audit committee meeting, security showed up at Vincent's desk. Just like that. 2 security guards. Quiet and professional. They asked him to gather his personal things. Everyone watched as they walked him out of the office in complete silence. His laptop, his personal items, his dignity, everything leaving with him. By 5 p.m. that day there was a company-wide email. Vincent had been suspended pending investigation. That was all it said. No details. No real explanation. But everyone knew something huge had happened. The investigation took 6 long weeks. 6 weeks of interviews and documentation reviews and endless questioning. Jack from Fraud Investigation talked to me 4 more times during this period. Each time he had more questions than before. Each time, the scope of what Vincent had done became clearer and more serious and more disturbing. He'd been embezzling money for over a year. Not just the 7 million. Millions more, spread across different fraudulent invoices, all hidden in the company's systems carefully. He'd been planning this big theft, the $7 million one, to cover his gambling debts and disappear completely from the country. If I'd signed off on it, he would have taken the money and run. And I would have been the one who approved it. My name would have been on the paperwork. I could have gone to prison for fraud. That thought kept me up at night for weeks. How close had I come to disaster? How close had Vincent come to destroying my life completely? Meanwhile, I was working with Patricia on a new project that kept my mind focused. The company wanted to implement better fraud detection systems. Better controls everywhere. Better oversight procedures. Better auditing methods. They wanted to make sure something like this could never happen again to the company. Patricia put me on the team directly. It meant I was working closely with the executive leadership now. They knew my name. They knew I'd caught the fraud. They knew I'd done the right thing. Felt good. It felt like my career was actually moving forward at last. But it also felt scary and uncertain. Vincent had been my director. He'd been trusted by everyone. He'd been respected and well-liked. And he'd turned out to be a criminal. What did that say about the company? What did it say about any of us as employees? 3 months after Vincent's suspension, I was called into a meeting with Donna, the head of audit. She wasn't alone. Marcus Hendricks was there too. He was the CEO of the entire company. I'd seen him in the hallway maybe twice in 5 years. Now he was sitting directly across from me, looking me straight in the eye with genuine concern. "Alexis, what you did took real courage and bravery," he said sincerely and carefully. "You could have looked the other way. You could have signed that invoice and moved on with your life. But you didn't. You did the right thing. That matters to us. It matters a lot to this company." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded silently, trying not to cry. "We want to offer you a promotion," Donna said seriously and thoughtfully. "Senior analyst to fraud investigation manager. You'd work with Jack's team directly. You'd help us build those new systems. You'd help protect this company from fraud." My breath caught in my throat. Promotion. Real promotion. The kind I'd been working toward for years. "What about my current role?" I asked nervously. "Someone else will take over," she said kindly. "You've earned this opportunity." Took the job. How could I not? It was everything I'd worked for during my entire career. Everything I deserved. My first day in my new office, I looked out the window at the city below. I could see all the way to the water in the distance. I had a real office now. Not a cubicle. A door that closed. A view of the entire city. Everything had changed in 3 months. Everything had changed the moment I decided to do the right thing. But I also knew something else that scared me deeply. Vincent was still out there. The investigation had been completed finally. He'd been charged with fraud, embezzlement, and conspiracy. He was going to trial. But trials take a very long time. Justice moves incredibly slowly. I wondered if he blamed me for his arrest. If he hated me. If he was planning something against me. Those thoughts kept me company on quiet nights when I couldn't sleep. 6 months later, Vincent's trial began. I had to testify. I sat in that courtroom, looking at Vincent across the room, and I barely recognized him anymore. He'd aged terribly in those 6 months. His suit was rumpled and dirty. His eyes were hollow and empty and dead inside. He looked like a completely broken man who'd lost everything. His lawyer tried to make it seem like I'd misunderstood everything. Like I'd taken things out of context. Like I was exaggerating what I'd found. But the evidence was absolutely overwhelming. Email after email. Transaction after transaction. His own words, written down, proving his guilt completely. When I stepped off the stand, Vincent looked at me directly. Just for a second. And in that moment I saw something like acceptance. He knew he was finished. He knew the game was over completely. There was no escape anymore. The verdict came down on a Tuesday afternoon. Guilty on all counts. 8 years in federal prison. I felt nothing at all. Not triumph. Not satisfaction. Just complete relief and exhaustion. It was done. Finally done. The uncertainty was over completely. Vincent would go away to prison. The company would move forward. I would move forward. That night, I got drunk with Patricia at a bar near the office. We celebrated quietly, in the way you celebrate when something serious has finally ended. You did good, she told me seriously. You know that, right? You did something really hard, and you did it exactly right. I knew she was right about that. But I also knew that doing the right thing was expensive. It had cost me my director. It had changed my entire career path. It had made me someone people feared a little bit. Someone who'd reported one of their own to the authorities. The months that followed were strange and different and difficult. I settled into my new role gradually and carefully. I worked with Jack on fraud detection systems for the company. We implemented new controls everywhere. New oversight mechanisms. New training programs for all employees. We made it harder for people like Vincent to steal from the company. I was good at the work. Really good. I understood how fraud worked because I'd seen it up close. I understood how good people could rationalize bad things. I understood how desperate people could convince themselves that rules didn't apply to them anymore. But there was something else I learned too. I learned that being a fraud investigator meant you were never truly popular. People feared you. They whispered about you in the hallway. They wondered if you were watching them. Some people started avoiding me. They didn't want to be seen talking to me at lunch. They worried I might investigate them someday. It was isolating in ways I hadn't expected. I had a job title and authority, but I didn't have many friends at the office anymore. Patricia was still there for me, but most of my old colleagues kept their distance. I tried not to let it bother me. I told myself that this was part of the job, part of the price of doing the right thing. But sometimes late at night I felt lonely. The first time I had to investigate a colleague, my hands shook. I had to look into suspicious activity in the marketing department. A manager was potentially overbilling clients. I gathered the evidence. I documented everything carefully. I presented my findings to the audit committee. The manager was fired. No one thanked me. Instead, people looked at me with resentment. They saw me as the person who'd destroyed someone's career. They didn't see the person who'd prevented the company from losing money. They saw the whistleblower. The person who reports people. The person you can't trust. But I knew the truth. I knew I'd done the right thing. And that had to be enough for me. But something stayed with me always. Something from those 3 months of uncertainty and fear and stress. I kept thinking about how close I'd come to signing that invoice. How different everything would have been if I'd just signed it. I'd started seeing a therapist, something I didn't tell many people at work about. I talked about the pressure I'd felt. The fear. The sense of responsibility. How hard it had been to do the right thing when doing the wrong thing would have been easier. The therapist told me that what I was experiencing was completely normal. Trauma, even small trauma, leaves marks on people forever. And what I'd gone through had been traumatic. I'd been put in an impossible position. I'd had to choose between loyalty to my boss and loyalty to myself. Loyalty to my company and loyalty to the truth. Those were impossible choices to make. She helped me understand that I wasn't responsible for Vincent's choices. I didn't make him a criminal. I just had the courage to report what I found. That distinction mattered more than I realized at first. She also helped me understand why I felt guilty sometimes. Why I wondered if I'd done the right thing. Why I sometimes felt like I'd betrayed Vincent, even though he'd tried to betray me. The human mind is complicated. We can know something is right and still feel guilty about it. We can know someone is guilty and still feel sympathy for them. I learned to live with those contradictions. I learned that doing the right thing doesn't always feel good. Sometimes it feels terrible, but it's still the right thing to do. That was the real lesson Vincent taught me. 2 years after Vincent's trial ended, I was sitting in my office when I got an important email from the FBI. They were investigating a larger fraud ring that operated across multiple companies in the area. Vincent had been connected to them somehow. They wanted to talk to me. They wanted to know everything I knew about his contacts, his methods, his connections. I met with 2 FBI agents at a coffee shop near the office. They showed me photographs of other people, other criminals, other people Vincent had worked with during his time. Some of them were still active, still stealing from companies, still hurting innocent people. I gave them everything I had, everything I knew, everything I remembered. I felt like I was doing it all over again. Reporting, testifying, being part of the system of justice working to catch criminals. The FBI agents told me that Vincent wasn't working alone. He was part of a network, a group of people stealing from companies across the entire country. My case had helped them understand the pattern. My evidence had helped them catch others. This wasn't just about Vincent anymore. This was about stopping a larger criminal operation. One of the agents gave me a card at the end of our meeting. She told me that if I ever wanted to work with the FBI, they'd be interested in having me. The idea stuck with me. I'd never thought about working for the FBI before, but it seemed like the logical next step. My career had started by accident, but now I was thinking about where I wanted it to go intentionally. That's when I realized something important about myself and my life. This was my calling. This was what I was supposed to do with my life. I'd stumbled into it by accident, by being in the right place at the right time, by having the courage to do the right thing in one difficult moment. But it had turned into something bigger, something that mattered so much. I'd prevented fraud. I'd helped send criminals to prison. I'd helped protect innocent people from being victimized by people they trusted. This wasn't just a job. This was a purpose. I started thinking about getting my certification in fraud investigation. Maybe going back to school for it. Maybe doing this work at a higher level. Maybe making it my actual career path for life. I talked to Jack about going back to college. He encouraged me completely. He said I had natural talent for this work. Natural instinct. He said I should pursue it formally. That same year, I enrolled in evening classes at the university. I was working full-time and going to school at night. It was exhausting, but it was also fulfilling in ways my old job never was. I was building something real, something meaningful. 3 years after Vincent was arrested, I got a call from Patricia. She was moving on to another job finally. She'd taken a position at another company, heading up their compliance department. She wanted me to know before the official announcement came out. "You should apply for my job," she told me. "You're ready. You've been ready for 2 years. Director of Compliance. Director role. The kind of role Vincent had held. The kind of role I'd once feared, thinking about everything that came with it. But I knew now that not all directors were like Vincent. Most people tried to do the right thing. Most people didn't let circumstances push them into criminality. Most people had integrity and honesty. I applied for the position. Got the job. 2 weeks later, I was promoted to director. Full circle. Everything had come full circle. The company that had once called me by my first name and offered me a simple job as an analyst now wanted me to lead the entire compliance department. It was remarkable how much could change in 3 years. How much a single decision could change everything about your life. At my welcome dinner as director, the CEO stood up and told the story of how I'd caught Vincent's fraud. He told it like a victory story. Like I was a hero who'd saved the company. And I understood in that moment why people needed stories like that. Why they needed to believe that doing the right thing led to success. That integrity mattered. That courage was rewarded. But I also knew the real version of the story. The complicated version. The version where I'd been terrified and uncertain. Where I'd almost made the wrong choice. where I'd had help from Patricia and the audit committee and so many other people. I wasn't a hero. I was just someone who'd refused to let myself be dragged down by someone else's mistakes and crimes. As the new director, I made changes immediately. I implemented new policies to prevent fraud. I created a hotline where employees could report suspicious activity anonymously. I trained the staff on fraud detection. I wanted to make sure that no one would ever feel alone like I had felt when I discovered Vincent's scheme. I wanted to create a culture where doing the right thing was celebrated, not feared. I wanted to build something better than what had existed before. Years later, long after Vincent had been released from prison and disappeared, I thought about him sometimes. I wondered what his life was like now. I wondered if he thought about me. If he blamed me for his fall from grace. If he understood that I'd actually tried to save him by reporting him before it got worse. If he'd reported me instead of himself, nobody would have cared. He would have just been another criminal. But because I reported him, the whole thing came to light. His crimes, his debts, his desperation. Everything came out into the open. Maybe that was better than the alternative. Maybe the truth, even when it's painful, is better than the lie we live with. I also thought about the people I'd helped catch after Vincent. The fraud network had been dismantled. Dozens of people had been arrested. The FBI had told me that my initial case had cracked open their entire investigation. My courage had led to justice for so many people. I'd become someone who made a real difference. I'd become someone who mattered. And that meant something to me. I sit in my office now, as Director of Compliance at Hartwell Financial Solutions, and I think about that morning when Vincent dropped the folder on my desk. That moment when everything changed for me forever. I was 25 years old then. I am 32 now. In those 7 years, I've learned that doing the right thing is never as simple as it seems. It's never just black and white. It's complicated and scary and uncertain and difficult. But it's also the only way to live with yourself. The only way to look in the mirror and see someone you respect. That Invoice taught me more than any class ever could. Taught me about integrity, about courage, about what it means to stand up against pressure, about what it means to choose yourself and the truth over comfort and convenience. And I've never regretted it. Not for a single second of my life. Not once. Today someone new came to my office. A young analyst, scared and uncertain, asking for advice about reporting a supervisor who was doing something suspicious. I listened to her story. I told her she was brave to come to me. I told her she was doing the right thing. And I told her my story. By the end, she had tears in her eyes. She was terrified, but she was also determined. She was going to report what she'd seen. And I was going to help her do it right. Because that's what people like me do now. We help others find the courage to do the right thing. We help them understand that integrity matters. We help them become the people they're meant to be. And that's the real victory. That's the real purpose of everything I went through.